hid in the back. I see that the back is popular, so I was back in the popular section, but remained virtually anonymous. But here just to see, Logan and I had been introduced to one another, I don't know, was it a year and a half ago? Something like that. Had an opportunity to interact along the way, but like you all, my own life represents a journey of more surprises than of great plans well fulfilled. And I think that's one of the constants of our own human experience, is that we have a life made up of surprises and changes and interruptions and injuries and illnesses and setbacks. And in the midst of that, we wonder, who is God? What is he up to? And what's going on with me in the midst of all that? And these are reasonable questions. Just know that if you've been asking those questions, or that you find those questions rise to the surface for you, you're in really good company. It probably helps ratify the fact that you're a human and that you're living a genuine human experience. And the difference is we have been invited to not live this experience alone or on our own. We have been invited to live this experience in a restored and right relationship with the one who made us. And as we grow in understanding who he is, it also affects us in our understanding of who we are, and then what's going on in our everyday experience. In this season of our lives, we have experienced a recent curveball in regard to our own ministry assignment, our own ministry location. And it's been an unsettling couple of months for us. We may have been surprised by those things. God has not been surprised. And he's invited us into a new level of interaction and trust and relationship with him as a result of that curveball. And the scriptures tell us curveballs will come. If you're familiar with the scriptures at all, the letter in the New Testament that's considered somewhat a prophetic letter is the letter of James. And as James is writing that letter, he's offering us timeless insights into our time-bound experiences. And he's telling us, recognize God's in this. It's not just a play of time. It is a play of purpose. And the person who's behind the purpose of that time and that experience is God himself. So, James 1 says, when you find yourself experiencing surprising adversity, curveballs, not things that you've necessarily done and therefore you're experiencing the consequence of what you've done. It's just something has fallen upon you, come upon you. What do you do? He says, be patient in those times. And I think the call to be patient is, don't go with your first couple of reactions. They're probably not the best. And even if they're good, they're probably just in your own power, limited by your own perspective. So don't knee-jerk, reflex, jump into those first things. Be patient, so as to say there's something more going on here than might be immediately evident. Well, who is it that has a perspective beyond our immediately evident? Our Maker, right? The one who knows and loves us and knows and is involved in our very circumstances. Be patient. And then he says, count it joy. Count it joy. And as weird and contradictory as that seems, even in our most recent experience, our first inclination wasn't joy. Our first inclination was consistent with how we're wired. Like in my case, I want to know the facts. Can we connect the dots? Can I get additional information? Can I see where this is going? That's my wiring. But my wiring isn't my own. Neither is yours. See, we've been made a certain way to interact with and experience and receive what God's doing, and to experience our world and to be used of good in our world. But I have to submit myself to him for that to happen. If I don't submit who I am to him, I just operate in my own strength. And I won't find joy. I just won't find joy. The deeper I go into myself, usually the darker it gets, not the brighter. I don't find joy there. Joy is the gift of God's intervention in our limitations. And he awakens us to something only he can provide. And what he provides us is a perspective that's bigger. It's beyond this moment and these set of circumstances. And to trust him to believe he has provisions we need. And there's joy in that. There isn't joy in the suffering. I have a friend who has recently, at the end of last year, his wife died of a cancer battle. They've fought for 5 years, and they fought that battle so valiantly, so courageously. Young girls, 10 and 8 years old, and now he finds himself a single father. But he and his wife had wanted to write a book as a result of this experience they've had with God through this very difficult journey. And currently the working title of the book is Thank You, Cancer. Because of what happened in their relationship with God through that journey, they've hated the journey. But what they've loved is what they've experienced of God and what they've learned of themselves. And now they want to do good for others through the story of their own journey. It's part of what God invites us into that we really can't invite ourselves into very well. Even if we have the most positive outlook possible on life, it's pretty limited. And what God is telling us is, hey, when you run past those limits, you'll find I'm there. And I desire to provide you that which your heart really needs, that you can't provide for yourself. And when I provide it, it's going to be life-changing to you. You've experienced some of that here just in the recent journey you've been a part of, and who knows how all of this will unfold for you. But I know as I was invited to come and share the scriptures with you, it was initially in the context of today being a finishing day, not a day representing possible new beginnings. It wasn't that kind of day. But the passage that came to mind was one that may be very familiar with you, at least the story may be familiar. And it's from John chapter 11. If you've got your Bible, I want to encourage you to go there just because having the scriptures open in front of you will be of great benefit to you. Wanting you to see this from God to you, not just from me to you, so that as you go beyond today, you can continue to resonate with what it is God has for you from this scripture. So we're in John chapter 11, and in John, what we find is this unique position of the author of John in relation to all of the other authors who wrote about the life of Jesus: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and now John. As you may know, those first three accounts of Jesus' life have a lot of similarity and agreement in them. They've given them a name. Do you anybody know what the name of these three Gospels together is? It's unfair to play technical quiz day on Sunday. It's just not right. They're called the Synoptic Gospels. Have you heard that term before? The Synoptic Gospels. And the reason they're referred to that is because there's this similarity they share. Their theme and their emphasis is on who Jesus is as the King, and that he's come fulfilling the promises of Messiah, and he's worthy of being recognized, anointed, and placed as King, and the belief was he would deliver his people from those who had them, the Romans in this case, who had them under captivity. Then we get to John, and John has this gear shift in the representation of Jesus. He begins to talk about him so intimately and personally. He says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. And you, hold it. What? This isn't about a king. This is about a person. This is about someone who's going to come in the flesh, and he is present, and John's going to spend his whole letter fleshing out the fleshly credibility of Jesus, that we could depend upon him as a person, and we could gain access to the Father through a personal relationship with this person, who is also the King, but his emphasis is on the person. In fact, John wrote that the purpose for his writing was that we might know who Jesus is, and in knowing him, we would believe in him. You can check that out in John chapter 20. Very explicit about how the Spirit of God is working through John, the author of this particular account of Jesus. So as we come to Luke 11, I want you to recognize that this is the culmination of a series of signs that have been given, that John has captured for us specifically to help us know that this Jesus is worth believing in. So let me rehearse some of the signs, and I think you'll remember them as you think about your experience or knowledge of the book of John. One is he turned water into wine. You remember that experience? You may not still be looking for that kind of wine as you purchase yours, in the event you purchase yours. You may not. But you have to appreciate the fact that in this moment, Jesus kind of distinguishes himself as sort of the greatest bartender, if you will. Nobody had ever done this before. And with what he did, they were amazed. Not just that water was turned to wine, but it was a superior wine. Served out of time, because typically they would serve the superior wine early in the experience and the cheap stuff later, because those who had consumed this wouldn't recognize this wasn't as good. Does that make sense? I'm not a drinker, so I don't have a personal experience to share. However, having observed others, after having a few drinks, they're unaware of their future drinks. You know, it's like, yeah. So Jesus does this superior wine provision late in the process, yet it's arresting because it's the conversion of water to wine. A sign. A second sign is when he heals the royal official's son. A dramatic intervention in the son's health and life. He goes on to heal a disabled man. He then has one of his feedings of the 5,000. He then walks on water. He then heals a man born blind. All of these different interventions in the condition of man that categorically change things. And this now is the seventh of those signs, this healing of Lazarus. So we're in this accumulation of various actions of Jesus, all designed to tell us he is worth believing in, because he is the one and the only one who can intervene in our lives in these ways. All of these different signs have, I think, connections to the fulfillment of promises that are yet future for us. He has promised to prepare for us a feast at which the best food and drink will be served. But it will feel out of time, because it's at a time that we don't plan and we don't prepare. Even Jesus himself said, that time is one my Father knows, not me. He will reveal it in his time. And that's what he does. He seems to bring these actions for our benefit, sometimes out of time. Just like today. You are learning of an experience for you as a congregation, for this is a church that seems out of time. Don't know what will come of it either. It's yet to be experienced and revealed. But not unlike God, to do things that not only interrupt time, but tell us what he's up to that's even bigger than the limitations of time. That's what God does. Not only are these signs a part of John's revelation of Jesus, but I want to make reference to some metaphors that are used. Again, I think they may be familiar to you, but these are all found in this book of John, this somewhat unique gospel letter in light of the four gospel letters. So these sayings capture some of these metaphors. One is he describes himself as the bread of life. He says he's the light of the world. In John 10, he has a couple of others. One is he's the gate to the sheepfold. And he's also the good shepherd. And then he says in this structure today, we get into Lazarus' life, he's the resurrection and the life. He goes on to say, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And I am the true vine. So we have in John these signs and these sayings that are all intended to give us this living in flesh access to God through Jesus, this person of Jesus, that we would feel him in this way. So when we jump into John 11, we're in this setting, all right? I just wanted to capture some of the elements that may surround what we're experiencing here today. So let's pick it up in verse 1. We'll just read along here. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and his sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters put out word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said to his disciples, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for the God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let's get up and go back to Judea." Strange set of circumstances, isn't it? If you had a good friend who you knew could help you, you had need and you put out the call, "Come, help." And the friend ghosted you. That's a new media term in case you're unfamiliar with it. It didn't respond to you. Treated you like you hadn't reached out. Crickets. It's not crickets without purpose. We get a little bit of a snapshot here that there's something going on in the bigger picture that Jesus was in touch with, but nobody else was. It didn't make sense. Good friend has a need. Other friend can meet it. Doesn't respond. You ever felt like that? Have you ever felt like that? Yeah, I have. Been in a situation that needed intervention. And in faith, I turn to God and say, "Intervene." Chirp, chirp, chirp. No, really intervene. Yeah. As that experience is going on here, Jesus has told them there's something God's up to that's bigger than this. We'll hang out until he tells us what to do next. See, Jesus himself is continuing to demonstrate that he's in submission to the will of the Father. You may remember earlier in John when Jesus is directly challenged about, "Why is it you do what you do, Jesus?" You may remember his answer. His answer was this: "I do what I see the Father doing." He's later challenged about why he says the things he says, makes these bold claims, makes these declarations. His answer is very similar. He said, "I say what I hear the Father saying." He is as dependent upon the Father as he's inviting you and me to be. He's living out a way of living he's invited us into. So even in this case, do you imagine Jesus was sort of chill, knowing that Lazarus was ill, good friend, he could probably make a difference, and he's holding up? Do you think that was easy for Jesus? Because he already had the end of the story, of course. No, he had parts of the story. He's going to live out the story in real time. And part of his living out the story in real time is what builds our confidence we can do the same. He's not trumping this situation because he's Jesus. He never does that, by the way. He never throws the Jesus card. He says, "Hey, I'm trying to tune into my Father." You remember those nights he was up all night in prayer? Was that some formula he was doing, like a prayer checklist? No, he really depended on the connection to the Father because he needed a sense of presence and intimacy that he could walk out in his day-to-day life. And so that's what he's modeling for those who are living with him. So he says, "We're going to hold on, then we're going to go." And he said, "Hey, listen, you remember," his disciples have to tune him into their history. "Last time we were there, they tried to stone us." I suspect this was coming from the Eeyore group of disciples. "Oh no, let's go. We're going to get stoned anyway. It's negative, everything's gray, like today. It's all, you look out and all you can see is fog and, danger. And they're concerned about these most immediate things. things that threaten them. And it's just so representative of you and me, isn't it? Gosh, I'm a fairly forward-looking, optimistic individual. But I discover when curveballs come, there's a bunch of Eeyore in there. And at times I act and look similar to Eeyore. You know what I mean? You can use the name to describe what Eeyore is as a character if you want. But I'm not worth being around. I'm of no help to anyone. I'm not experiencing who God is and what he has for me, and I can't be good to others. I can't be of benefit to them. Because I'm kind of down in my own fears is what they're in, right? They're fearful that if they take any more steps back to Judea, could be our last. I mean, that last one, we just slipped through. We have no idea how we got out of there. Skin of our chinny chin chin, and we're going to go back. They're fearful, and rightfully so. It's what we have to embrace when we appeal to Jesus for an intervention and he doesn't provide it. It's real fear. And just simply being with Jesus doesn't necessarily answer all my fears. It puts me in the context of having access to him and having an experience of him, but I'm still human. I'm still wrestling with who I am. And God wants us to experience him as honestly as we experience ourselves honestly. And know that he's present and he has what we need. And oftentimes that's just presence. He has that for us. So then he tells his disciples, all right, it's time to go. And they say to him, listen, he is dead. And he says, listen, for your sake, that's not the case. Let's go. And Thomas, he finally gets outed, if you will, in verse 16. All right, let us go, that we may die with him. He's the chief Eeyore of the group, by the way. So they arrive, and they're at a distance, about 2 miles, they say, and the sisters become aware of Jesus coming, and Martha goes out to meet him. Mary stayed at home, it says. When Martha gets to Jesus, I want you to see what he says, what she says to him. My apologies. Capture what Martha says to Jesus, verse 21. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You capture that phrase? Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Now, it is expressed in the language as a statement, and I think it's an honest representation. But what we discover is that there's a question in the statement. How do we know what the question is? Because she goes on to kind of answer it herself. She says, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus says, well, your brother will rise again. She says, well, yeah, I know that. What Martha doesn't know is why Jesus didn't come. So what we discover is she's got a belief question. Hers isn't as much a fear question as the disciples was. Hers is a unbelief question. So Martha responds, Jesus says, your brother will rise again. Martha says, yes, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection in the last day. Jesus then says, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? How many times did you hear believe? If you didn't count, just say several. There were several times. You know what that tells us, just quickly? This is about belief and unbelief. And it isn't simply about belief in resurrection. It's about belief in Jesus, the I am of resurrection. This is the shift Martha's being faced with here, is the shift between God's immediate action and who God himself is. That's the shift. So do you believe in me, or do you just believe in what I'll do right now? That's the shift. Jesus finishes with a question. Martha, do you believe this? Verse 26, moves right into 27. Yes, Lord, she told him. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world. Now, what we're not told in that interplay is about the shift that took place in Martha's heart. Because Martha, would it be fair to say she came out hunting for her pound of flesh? I mean, where were you? I believed you would come and do what I know you can do. See, I believe you could do this. Isn't that worth points? I don't know. And you didn't come? So do I have a misplaced belief? I believed, and you let me down. I would guess, depending on how your journey has gone with Jesus, you have had your moments where in your mind that's exactly what you wanted to say. I believed in you, and you didn't show up. I believed in you, and you didn't come and do what I believe you can do. Here's what I'd like to offer you. Jesus' invitation to you and to me is to say what's on our mind. Don't sanitize it. He doesn't need it cleaned up for him. He needs to hear what's really on our mind. Because if we offer it to him honestly, it positions us to listen for what's on his mind. Does that make sense? How many times have you ever had your children, those of you who have children, have to sit them down and say, listen to me? Why do you do that? As a parent, you do that because you can see the noise in their eyes, right? I mean, their eyes are spinning like a merry-go-round. And you've got something you know needs to land. And if they don't dial in, it's not going to land. I think Jesus is demonstrating with his interaction with Martha, say what's on your mind, because then it will help you listen to what's on mine. That's what people who love one another do, isn't it? You learn to speak honestly, you learn to speak forthrightly, you learn to listen actively. That's what Jesus is demonstrating. We'll come back and look at this experience from a different angle in just a moment. Something happens between 26 and 27 verse, because there's a shift of heart. And suddenly she's lost her quest for the pound of flesh. And she expresses her confidence in who Jesus is. Still doesn't have her answer to what he's going to do. She has no idea. But he's there. He listened to what was on her mind, and he offered what was on his. And they came together around believing. After this, it says, verse 28, she goes back and tells Mary, hey, the teacher is here, and he's asking for you. And when Mary heard this, she quickly got up, and she went to him. Jesus had not yet entered the village where they lived, but he was on his way there. So Mary comes, and she has an entourage. So that tells you a little bit about how different a person than she was than Martha. Martha's an independent crusader, and that might be you. I mean, you've always got your sword on your hip, and you're ready to roll. You know what I mean? Others of you, you got your network, your little group, and something happens, and the whole group gets stirred up. They're all buzzing, you know, it's always like, we've got both of those here. Isn't that kind of fun? You'll find yourself in the disciples, and Martha and Mary. You may find yourself in the crowd, but you'll find yourself in this mix. Verse 32 says, and Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, and she fell at his feet, and she said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Sound familiar? I don't think they scripted this. You know, if you watch the news very much, you get the sense a lot of that's really scripted, you know? 8 channels, and they all say the same thing. Something's up with this. That's not what's going on here. They both had a similar perspective. They were anticipating Jesus to come with the call and intervene and save their brother and spare them from his death. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with him weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? "Come and see, Lord," the group said. And Jesus goes with them, and he wept. How do we know that Mary's statement was also a question? Because those with her tell us what the question was. Look at the next verse. Then the Jews who were with her said, See how he loved him? See, she didn't have a belief question, did she? Her sister did. I think it's fair to say Martha had a love question. Mary had a love question. Martha said, I believed you to come, be able to heal him. You didn't come. Mary is saying, oh my goodness, I thought you loved him. I thought you loved us. And so he doesn't get into a belief conversation with Mary, does he? He simply weeps with her, genuinely. And what it communicates to her and those with her, he really did love him. And those who were a bit more jaded among them said, well, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying? They were this combination of love and belief, weren't they? I mean, they were still kind of looking for their justification. They had their criticism rolling. I think you can find yourself in this. You know, if Jesus was kind enough to invite his disciples into their fears and still lead them into what God had planned for them, I think we can too. If Jesus was loving enough to be present with Martha so as to say to Martha, hey, just say what's on your mind, and then listen and receive what's on mine, and you may find it really meets your need. Maybe meets a need deeper than the one you realized you had. You thought your need was your brother's healing. The real need is a shift in your heart to believe in me, in who I am, not just what I can do. And in Mary's case here, I think Jesus is inviting you and me to share our experience with him. Share where you are. Share your feelings with him. And he will meet you where your feelings are. What Jesus is demonstrating to us here is he really gets you personally. He really gets you. Use the words that make sense to you, and I assure you they'll make sense to him. Express the feelings that you're feeling genuinely, and he'll get you. He won't miss you. Let's play this out differently. Let's say Martha comes out with her, I'll call it short sword. She's going to get this corrected, right? And Jesus looks at her and interacts with her, and he just starts weeping. Would that have been congruent with who Martha was? Would not have, would it? Martha would have come out all stirred up. Martha would have gone, are you okay? Do you need to see someone? Think about his interactions with Mary. If he'd have gone to Mary, and he'd have said, now Mary, sit down. Let's have a conversation about the resurrection and whether you believe in me, and is there a belief issue? What would have happened with Mary? Mary would have been so confused. Like, wouldn't have been any heart connection. I think Jesus is saying, hey, bring the fears you have like he did with his disciples. God's got this. With Martha, he's saying, say what's on your mind, and then listen to what's on mine. And with Mary, he's saying, share your experience. Share the feelings you're having. And then let me share mine with you. And we'll hear each other's heart. We'll connect. Well, the story really does culminate in this marvelous experience. Jesus goes to the tomb. He instructs them to roll the stone away. Martha, being the good caregiver she is, says, this is going to stink. This is a bad plan. He's been dead 4 days. You really want to do this? He refers to her again, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? Jesus had already made her aware there were bigger things going on that were immediately accessible, immediately visible.
trust me in this. Well, they did take the stone away, verse 41 says, and Jesus looked up and he said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I am saying this for the benefit of the people here who are standing around me, so that they would believe that you're the one who sent me. In essence, that they would know you're the one empowering me to do this. When he said this, Jesus called out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! And the dead man came out, hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. And he said to them, hey, go take the grave cloths out of him and let him go. Let him go. They wanted him healed before the fact. God chose to restore him to life after the fact. It's just kind of what he does sometimes. Sometimes he intervenes before the fact. And man, that feels good, doesn't it? I hope you've journaled some of those moments for you, because they're ones we have to hold on to. We have to look back at, to see our story and our experience with God and how his goodness has been shown to us. And then we can share it with others. But in this case, it's after the fact. He intervenes, and it does in fact affirm, this is the one who will restore life no matter what. And as one of those key signs, this is sort of the final and most climactic sign offered in the account of John of Jesus, that Jesus would be the one to restore life to all who believe in him. There were many who came out of that believing. There were others who went and stirred up trouble because of this. It was a transformational moment for the disciples in their fear, for Martha in her unbelief, for Mary in her questions about love, and I hope for you and me in our own experience, that we could appreciate that God is present, revealing himself for who he is, inviting you and me to come near to him and bring our fears and our doubts and our feelings, our hurts, our needs, bring them to him. And out of what he gives us in that, receive the goodness, glorify God with that, and then share it with someone else. When God acts for good on our behalf, he means it to be genuinely for our good. But it is also for the benefit of others. It's not just for us. And when we offer others the story of God's goodness to us, it can't help but be beneficial to them. People around us are full of fear, doubt, questions about whether God cares for how they hurt and what they need. Does he really love? People around us have those questions. If God's answering some of those questions for you, if he's making provision for you, it may be a restored life. It may be any number of things. Just want to encourage you, like Mary, like Martha, capture what's happened. Share it with others and invite them to know Jesus like you know Jesus. So like his disciples, be honest with your fears, offer them up. Like Martha, say what's on your mind, listen to what's on his. For Mary, share what you're feeling, receive his feelings for you. And out of what you experience, capture it, journal it, and share it with others, that they might know you have a relationship with God through Jesus, and he has the provision your heart most needs. You with it? All right. Let me pray for you.